Hello and welcome to Monobiology. Today we're going to introduce the endocrine system. And basically the endocrine system allows our bodies to have chemical control. And it's very important in the maintaining of homeostasis. Now for AP Biology, this is chapter 45 in your textbook. And for Biology 12, this is chapter 8 in the Bio 12 textbook. One of the things you're going to do around this video is you're going to take your diagram that you can see on my Moodle site and you are going to label it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go through a few of the things that you have to label, and maybe as I do that you would label them. Okay, so the first thing, and this is already labeled on your diagram, and it's hard to see in this picture, but just that little outcropping there of the brain is the pituitary. Okay? Now, in this area right here is the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is very important. We'll talk about that a little bit in another video later on. But those are the two major endocrine system areas of the brain. Obviously the brain is important for coordination of all the body's activities, but those are the two major areas for the endocrine system. So the hypothalamus, and the pituitary, which is this little outcropping right here. Okay, the next gland we're going to look at is the thyroid gland. Now the thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland that's in your throat. And that's the thyroid gland. Now, as you can see, there's also 4 dots on the butterfly's wings. Those are called the parathyroids. Okay, so we have the thyroid gland, the butterfly, and the parathyroids, which are the dots on the butterfly's wings. The thymus gland, which is located just around the area where your heart would be, and that's that right there. Then a little bit lower in the body we have a few more glands. We have the adrenal glands, which are directly on top of the kidneys. Then we have the pancreas, which we've talked quite a bit about as part of the digestive system. It has different cells located inside of it. Some of them are obviously involved in the digestive system, and the others are involved in the endocrine system. And we'll talk about these things later on. Here we have the ovaries for females and the testes for males. Again, these ones right here we're already familiar with. That's the good news. The good news is several of the hormones we're going to talk about we've already discussed and we've already gone over in quite a great bit of detail when we did reproduction. That's the good news. The exciting news, perhaps, is that we have all of these to discuss, all the hormones that these glands produce to discuss, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. Just wanted to refresh, before we get to all the hormones, just wanted to refresh your memory that it's very important for organisms to maintain a constant internal environment, whether they are unicellular organisms or multicelled organisms like humans, or this rat here. We all have to have the ability to maintain a constant internal environment. That's what homeostasis is, a constant or steady internal environment. And hormones produced in the endocrine system allow us to do that. We're going to talk about the various ways that hormones allow us to do that, obviously a little bit later on, but just remember when we're talking about the hormones that it's important because they all work together to help us maintain this balance inside our body. In order to understand how homeostasis works, it's important to note, first of all, that there are 2 systems. We've talked a lot about the different body systems, but there are 2 systems, the nervous system and the endocrine system, that basically are the regulatory systems. In other words, they have the control over the idea of homeostasis. Without the nervous and the endocrine system, the rest of the body wouldn't be able to coordinate and work together to maintain that level of homeostasis. Okay, so there's some differences. The differences are that the nervous system is basically related to all of the nerve cells in our body, as you can see here, including all the brain tissue. Brain tissue, the spine, all the nerve tissues that go to the various areas of the human body, or if it was another animal, could be there too. endocrine system, on the other hand, see how they're not really directly linked together? There's no line. Like in here, you can see all these lines, and they're directly linked, and you can see how signals would be sent. That's not the case in the endocrine system. Endocrines have to use hormones. Nervous system uses electrochemical impulses, and the endocrine system uses chemical signals, which, of course, are the form of hormones. So animals use hormones to maintain homeostasis. How do they use these hormones, and what are the different types of hormones? Well, the good news is that hormones are only broken down into two types, as you can see here, steroid and protein. I'm going to show you some of this in a second here. We're going to link it to cell communication. But first of all, I'd like to just mention that hormones are chemicals that are released in one area of the body and travel through the bloodstream to have an effect on a different area of the body. Okay, so they're released in one area of the body, they travel through the bloodstream and trigger a response on a target cell or an effector cell in a different area of the body. Now, let's get back to the idea of the steroid versus protein hormones. Okay, so steroid hormones are lipid hormones, and protein hormones, well, obviously they're proteins. So different glands produce these different hormones. Now, why does that matter, Mr. Monahan? Well, it's a good question. I'm glad you asked. The reason that it matters is because the type of cell communication that happens when you have a steroid hormone is different from the type of communication you have when it is a protein hormone. You can see the cell signaling process here. Steroid hormones travel directly through the cell membrane. Why? Because they're made up of lipids, just like the cell membrane is. Protein hormones, on the other hand, bind to the outside of the cell. Why? Because they can't get through the cell membrane like these lipid proteins or these lipid hormones can. And as you can see here, the pathway on the inside is quite a bit different. The protein hormone one has several secondary messengers. It's a little bit more convoluted, more complicated, and this one a little bit more simplistic. We'll get into more detail about how these two different ones work, but just suffice to say, you have to understand that there's two different types and that there is differences between how the cells or these hormones deliver their messages. And that, in a nutshell, is an introduction, anyway, to the endocrine system.